Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. We are exploring the digital revolution and the impact it is having on all facets of our lives, from business to personal to how we look at the world, how we're traveling, education, and so forth like that. It's really a remarkable time. And we're delighted to have today one of our favorite digital all-stars, Bonnie Tinder, who's the founder and CEO of Raven Intelligence. Bonnie, welcome back to Cloud Wars Live.
Thanks, Bob. So glad to be here.
It's good to see you. And Bonnie, it sounds like you've got some results of some interesting research that's gone on here. And I know that that touches on so many things that are changing in the world today and the impact that, technology is having on so many facets of our lives. So what is sort of the highlights there for you, Bonnie? What really stuck out?
Yeah. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about what we saw in quarter three, 2021 for our project benchmarks around enterprise software implementations. And we know that there is a tremendous amount of growth happening. So many companies in the middle of digital transformation efforts, implementing new software and things like that. And so, what I did, and as well as my company, Raven Intelligence, did was to look at the quality and service delivery of projects so that, customers preparing for 2022 digital transformations can see sort of what happened in, with some very recent project success. And all of the results that we have are based upon customer survey once they've completed a project, and we ask them a series of questions about the project. How successful was it? Was it delivered on time, on budget, and things like that? And so essentially the data set that we have has over 1,300 customer reviews that really inform us about some interesting trends. And so that's what I thought would be interesting to talk through today with you, Bob. But the big standout that I thought was interesting was this rate of team and people change on projects. I think that was significant. It was a change that we saw even from Q2 to Q3, was this amount of churn that we had on the project team. And I think what we're seeing now is directly correlated to this idea of the Great Resignation happening in the broader world of work. So I would say that, in addition to some other interesting highlights, that was the big takeaway, is that we're seeing more churn on people teams.
Bonnie, that's striking because, over the last several months at different points when we've had our discussions here on Cloud Wars Live, you've really pushed this idea that it is so important, right? You can have the best technology in the world, but if the team's doing the implementation, if there's a lot of turnover, if you don't have the right mix of people in there, the best technology in the world is not going to overcome that. And now you're saying that, with the dramatic changes in the workforce, end to end today, this is really coming in. That's got to be well, in some ways, anything from devastating to challenging to just sort of nerve-wracking for a lot of folks. How do they try to deal with all this, Bonnie?
Yeah. Well, just to zero down and give you sort of a glimpse as to what's happening in the professional services realm. So many of these digital transformations are dependent upon a third-party professional services firm or consulting firm that helps companies through these efforts. And within that space, so if you were to look at the trends with that professional services just in general, they are the second highest industry with turnover. They're right behind retail, actually. And so this idea of them moving from organization to organization, or changing career paths entirely, is a significant sort of market current going on within this group. And so that's sort of the underlying cause to a lot of these people issues. And as you mentioned before, the success of projects depends on the team. And when you have a change on people, all of a sudden there's a lot of other challenges that come up: knowledge transfer, team dynamics, and things like that. And so anytime that you have these changes, it's going to create sort of downstream impacts on a project. Most of the time they're going to go over time. Most of the time they're going to go over budget if in fact they had a change in the leadership of the project or the consulting assistance with the project. So the impacts of churn on a team not only affect, the consistency of the project, but many times lead to it going beyond the time and budget that was originally accounted for. That's not even to say, what's the overall sentiment or feeling of a customer when that type of thing happens, because you're getting used to a new resource. Maybe that resource is not a senior. They certainly didn't start with you on the project. So getting them up to speed on how things work and all of that. Again, there's some significant, issues that come into play when you're introducing new players on the team. And so, I think the way for customers and PS organizations and software vendors at this point to deal with those type of things is, number one, as much as possible, keep the team intact and, go with organizations that don't seem to have a lot of churn. Those are the organizations that treat their employees well, have a great culture, all those type of things. They're less likely to have churn on the team. But the reality is right now, sometimes we just have to sort of play the cards that we're dealt, knowing that there is going to be a higher propensity for or possibility that team members are not going to be the same as with those that you started.
Anya, I wonder too if, as part of that, I understand the term great resignation, what's going on there, but I also think that term implies that, hey, there's just, millions of people just leaving the workforce. They're just going to go and, go fishing or whatever it is that people aren't working do. But it's the great resignation is like step one. So many, and I don't know the percentage, 80, 90, 95% of those people want to work. They just don't want to do the sort of work they were doing before. And I wonder how many of these skilled people will come in, maybe form a new sort of organization that can come in here and maybe say, if I could just clear away some of the BS from what I do, I really love working with clients and getting these projects up successfully. Have you heard about any sort of startups or new approaches that are arising from the sort of the other side of the great resignation?
It's interesting. I spoke this last week with a couple of consultants who left the consulting world just recently. And their main complaint, and this is almost going contrary to this idea of working remotely, but their main complaint was the fact that they were not able to travel anymore was actually something that they missed. They felt like it made their job 10 times more difficult because of the lack of travel. As part of being a consultant, they enjoyed that, sort of lifestyle or work style. And with that all having moved to, remote, they didn't feel the job was the same. And so that was a big reason that at least the consultants that I spoke to were getting out of it, is because they felt like they were taking away part of their job satisfaction as well as their ability to do the job well. I think that, should that go back to more of a norm and, that balance coming back in where they're able to do more of those face-to-face things that they really thrive on, it's almost like, going back old school in these cases might reinvigorate some of that initial passion. I think in general, we're seeing projects delivered a lot more remotely, which has been a big shift in here. And I think, creating more efficiency in that remote delivery is probably going to be what the future is. as opposed to, switching back to the on-site, consulting that was done in the past.
Fascinating, Bonnie. It really is. And that's you've got something here across overall the results that you've got, right? These aren't just anecdotal points that you're making. You said you've got 1,300 digital transformation reviews, which is fantastic. So if we set aside this notion of the churn and the people turnover, Bonnie, what are some of the biggest reasons that you're hearing about of why projects haven't done well?
Yeah. I think another obstacle that we saw in Q3 was the rate of change orders that were assigned to projects as a result of in some cases, the work not being properly scoped in the contract phase. About 42% of the time, the customer said, blame us. We got change orders, but that was because we changed the scope of the project, or it was something that we did that was not expected. 39% of the time, the projects were scoped well. So those are the ones that the project was scoped well and the customer didn't change their requirements. 39% of the time that was happening. However, with the bottom 20, those were the projects. If I had to look at the ones that had change orders due to a project being under scoped, either some or many change orders, we can really create a direct correlation between those and a negative satisfaction. Because when a project is not scoped properly and there's change orders, that immediately then tells me the project was late and over budget. And as soon as those two things creep in as a result of, hey, and it wasn't even our fault, that's when satisfaction is going to go, and drop in the what we call detractor, group. In general, if I look at Q3 satisfaction, the overall satisfaction with a project on average was about a 7.5 out of 10. And those clients that rated their project a 6 or less, 9 times out of 10, those are the customers that also had change orders as a result of underscope projects. So that was sort of an interesting correlation between the different aspects of projects. I would say the other sort of things that we look at all the time is the on time and on budget delivery. And that doesn't tell us was a project successful, but what it does tell us is within the framework that we had going into this project, did we sort of meet the time frame and the budget that we were given to do this work? And we had on-time delivery around 62%. So 60% of the time, or so, a project was delivered on time. 40% of the time, though, that means the project was late. And 20% of the time when it was late, it was 2 times the amount of time that was budgeted for. So we ask how late was it, and so a significant portion of that 40% wasn't just a little late; it was a lot late. The other thing that we ask about is, was it done on budget? 65% of these projects came in on budget, which is good. That's actually a little bit higher than we've seen in the past. But when projects go over budget, so that additional, the 35% bottom half of that, we see approximately 10% going 4 times over budget. So, again, there's ranges when we say on, over budget, how much over budget, and 10% of the time that was a significant amount over budget. So again, those don't tell us was the project successful. On the other hand, they're sort of indicators of, some of the other things going on.
Wow. 4 times over budget. I guess some of those could be successful, but it would involve some interesting back and forth negotiations, I think, along the way, right? But hey,
Yes.
I want to be sure to ask you about some of the pain points that you're hearing about over and over. But first, I just wanted to offer a word from our sponsor, BMC. BMC wants to know, is your business on its A game? That's when systems are intelligent by learning from markets, where automation is paramount yet effortless, and when technology and people work as one in an enterprise. The A game is your business at its absolute best. BMC calls this the autonomous digital enterprise. Find out more at bmc.com/A-game. So, Bonnie, what are some of those areas where you continue to hear from people about frustrations or things that just aren't working right?
Yep. Well, I wrote down three significant lessons learned from customers that we got in Q3. Number one, work to free up your internal project leader of other responsibilities. I personally underestimated our time commitment. And I think that's a theme that we hear in other quarters as well. But the fact that a project leader has the role of that project along with their day-to-day responsibilities, that's significant. And as much as possible, you can free that person up to focus solely on the project, I think is important. That will ensure the project is completed timely. I think number two, and this was from another customer who said, this was our first time using a third-party implementation partner. It was actually a refreshing experience, especially with little face-to-face interaction due to the pandemic. So in that case, having a consulting partner along for the journey, it was a significant positive for them, or lessons learned. So, many times we see success as a result of the third-party team that was chosen. And then finally, ensure that your project lead has the capacity to commit to the project full-time. Implementation is not for the faint of heart. Here again, going back to this idea of bandwidth and setting your team up for success, knowing that if you're going to be doing a digital transformation, you need to not only budget the dollars and the time for it, but know that, some of the other priorities that you have are going to take a backseat, or should take a backseat, to getting your digital project up and running. So those were the three significant ones that we saw in Q3.
Bonnie, that's wild, and I think the rate of change at which companies are going through upheavals and doing things differently and all, it's probably going to be even more challenging. To your first point there about ensuring the project leader is freed up from her or his regular responsibilities to be able to do that. But the way things are changing so much now, that'll be a challenge. So all this expertise and counsel that you're gathering at Raven Intelligence, it just seems like it's going to be more important than ever for companies to get this. So as we look ahead to 2022, if I guess it's one of those cases, if we thought this year was nutty, and it was, what's 2022 going to look like for clients or customers who are looking to adopt some of these projects that you've been describing here? What would you advise them about?
Yeah. I think number one, first and foremost, is really know your why. Have a clear project outcome that you can tie back to a defined business goal. I mean, that seems like an obvious one, but you'd be surprised how much of the time that's unclear. So really know your why and make sure that your entire team knows the why and is behind that as well. Number two, your team is going to make or break your success, and trying to ensure that you have as little change in that people equation as possible is really important. Knowing that, the great resignation and the rate, particularly of change within the professional services industry, is going to be a headwind for you. So your team is going to make or break your success. Pick your best people, pick your best partner, and then don't change the team if at all possible. Number three, you want to control what you can control, and sort of let everything else go. But things that you control are, being able to clean up your data ahead of time before you start. Make sure that you have a way to systematically manage your project throughout, and that you have a very clear timeline, and that you're keeping that timeline updated. And those simple sort of project hygiene type of things really make a big difference in the success of the project. And then finally is this area of integrations. And every single project that you have is going to touch another aspect of your business and another system. Don't underestimate the fact that integrations are not always seamless. They're rarely seamless. They can take longer than expected, and they can be problematic. So the fewer integrations that you have, the better. The less spaghetti, the less mess, we always say. And you want to make sure that you're not just taking your vendor at their word that the integration with some other system is quote unquote seamless, because once you peel back the onion and are in the middle of the project, lo and behold, that seamless is two fields as opposed to what you really need. So make sure that you budget time, money, and the right resources to integrations, and so that your system will talk to everybody else that you need it to.
Hey, Bonnie, last question I wanted to ask you about, and it's great that you touched on this some in your last response. I wanted to ask about the software vendors, right? You've talked about the churn among the professional services firms and all that. What are the software vendors doing, or what do you feel they should be doing to help get out in front of some of these changes? What's their role and responsibility, especially for people listening who have projects underway or scheduled for 2022 and want to know, how do I get the best shot at getting this done right?
Yeah, well, I would say software vendors have their own issues in dealing with team churn and hiring. So they are not immune to this idea of, the great resignation. Um, I think what's important for software vendors and for customers to know about the software vendor is that they are aligning with third-party, implementers or partners that don't have a significant amount of change, and that they're keeping cognizant of what's going on within those organizations as well, so they know who the best partners to recommend are, that are not going to be constantly turning out their team resources. So I think that's really significant. I think for customers, ask the hard questions during the selection phase. What percentage of the time does your project team change? And can we have contractual obligation for you to keep project resources intact? Some of those simple questions really do help ensure that, if there is going to be a project team change, that, you're sort of keeping them on the hook to making sure that they're doing their diligence to make sure that that doesn't impact you personally.
Wow. Well, Bonnie, great stuff. Thank you for sharing a lot of these insights from Raven Intelligence's Q3 study. Always good things going on. And Bonnie, I wanted to ask you if I know that often on your board behind you, you've got like a phrase for the day or the week. If there wasn't there, I wondered, gee, for some of these professional services firms, maybe it would be, if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have no luck at all.
That one I should put up there. That's a good one, Bob. It's funny. It's early November, and so I was thinking this month of like creating my board to be a gratitude board, all the things that I feel, very grateful for, just because, 'tis the season. But I like your quote too.
Well, it's gratitude, but of a pretty thin kind, right? I'm glad I have the bad luck. I wouldn't have any. But I just thought, for from Chicago, famous old blues line, that would fit in.
I like it. I like it.
Well, Bonnie, thanks so much. It's always a great real world check hearing from you and what's going on, what you're finding out at Raven Intelligence. These are wonderful insights, and thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. And folks, thanks to all of you for being with us here at Cloud Wars Live. Bonnie is back with us every month, sharing some fantastic insights from her peer-reviewed company, Raven Intelligence. Hope November's off to a great start for you. We'll see you soon.